Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Denise Maple, who shares her skills journey from commercial banking into success and wellness coaching. I hope you enjoy. Denise Maple, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Noah. I am thrilled to be here.
Tell me a little bit about your background. You don't fit in a box.
I knew in high school I wanted to go into business. I wanted to go to the University of Illinois.
Why? Why did you know you wanted to do that?
Partly it was relying on my intuition. I was good at math. I liked making money. I started babysitting for money as early as 10 years old. This was back in the day when
you could leave a 10-year-old?
A 10-year-old babysitter would do.
Yeah.
And I think that the summer before I went to college, I had 3 jobs and I loved them all.
3 jobs at that early age. So you're clearly somebody that is very motivated and driven and have a strong work ethic. Where did that come from?
When I was young, we didn't have a lot of money. And so I think part of it was wanting to be able to do what I wanted to do. I think my parents also just had amazing work ethics.
What did you study in college?
Finance.
Finance into business. And out of college, what were you doing?
I was a banker. So I went into an entry-level credit training program. I was a commercial lender. And I actually worked in banking for 25 years in total. But that was like the first piece of it. And so I liked the analytical piece. I loved digging into the financial statements and running the numbers, but also being a lender also had the people side. So it had a really nice balance that it wasn't all sitting at my desk. I was going out to clients, we were going to ball games, and I even learned to golf. I like to say I stopped playing golf when they stopped paying me, when I stopped having clients to take.
Yeah.
Maybe it's left brain, right brain, or the analytical work, but also the personal touch.
I think we all have an idea of what a bank is. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? What are you in charge of?
Yeah, I had a lot of different roles in banking, but the one that I was always tied to in some way was this idea of commercial lending money to businesses. We also, of course, were cross-selling our other products and helping them manage their money. But a really big part of it was determining how to make this loan to this company. If it was a tough one, sometimes there was creativity in trying to figure out how to make it work, either with a guarantor or collateral or whatever it is. So there's a lot of regulations in banking. It was very detail oriented, and I can be very detail oriented. So I think that fit well.
Did you feel a emotional burden or pressure being the bearer to some degree of helping somebody with their loan for their small business? It's got to be a balance between, like you said, getting creative to figure out ways that you can satisfy their needs and give them that opportunity. But at the same time, it's risk management, and you're sort of balancing like what is responsible versus helping someone fulfill their dreams.
Yeah. And that's a great question, because I had small clients all the way to large corporate, depending on where I was in the bank. So there was different stages of it. So if it's a new startup, you are really wanting to help that person, but you also understand that businesses don't always make it.
Yeah.
So you also have this fiduciary responsibility to the bank as well. So getting creative, there was an incentive there. And then as the company started to grow and I was working with middle market or large corporate businesses, I could see how not only helping them was helping the owners or the people I was working with, but creating jobs. If you help a company grow, you're creating jobs.
That must have been really fulfilling.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. I appreciate and I have gratitude for my time in banking, for sure.
Was there any kind of standing relationship that you have after the loan is approved?
Yeah. Not only are we making sure that the clients are satisfied and seeing if they have any other needs we can help them with, we have to monitor the loan. Yeah. So we don't just make the loan and forget it, especially at the middle market or large corporate level. You really do have to stay in touch with the client. And I did develop some really meaningful relationships with clients from a business perspective. And some of them I still talk to today.
That's wonderful. What about the hard conversations? What do those sound like?
Yeah, that there are some hard conversations. If you have to call a loan, if you have to deny a loan, if you have to ask for more collateral, it doesn't feel good. Everyone feels better when everything's going well.
Yeah.
But it really taught me that, you can have those hard conversations and still be okay. And you can handle them in a way that in most circumstances, you can retain the relationship because everybody knows what the deal is going into a loan agreement, for example. Everyone knows that if you can't pay.
Yeah. It's problematic.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you train for those kinds of hard conversations? Do you go through any kind of training at the bank or outside of the bank as far as how to have honest, transparent conversations that can be difficult in conflict resolution?
At the time, no. Over time, we did take things like negotiations was a class that I think was really helpful. Not only did I take it through the bank, but I also took a class like that while I was getting my MBA. But really, the classes are great, and I teach, and I'm all for that kind of learning, but it's the application. So there's also a lot of mentoring going on. So whatever level you are in banking, you're usually, especially if you're young, early on, you're shadowing someone who's more senior. You have someone you can go to help coach you through those conversations, and that's always really helpful.
Yeah, real world experience always is gonna win out. Your experience and you're going through it is the only way to really get better at it. Let's talk about your skills within the banking world. You talked about math and being analytical. What would you say is the skills that you possess that helped you succeed in that role?
I didn't realize when I took the job that it was also a sales job, and maybe I did on some level, but the people skills and the relationship building skills is probably the biggest one. How do you maintain and build relationships that are mutually beneficial, right? Because in this world, nobody feels good about a lopsided relationship, especially if you're on the lower end of the teeter-totter.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's got to be mutually beneficial.
When I moved into teaching and training, teaching people how to be bankers, my analytical skills, all of my skills got raised because when you have to teach something, you have to understand it on a deeper level because you have to be able to explain it to someone else.
Totally. Yeah.
And what I learned over time, and I learned pretty quickly, is I don't have to know everything. It's perfectly okay to say, give me some time to think about that. Or let me research that for you and get back to you. We don't have to know everything, but we can figure it out.
With this many years of experience, both practical as well as teaching, it's almost like you are hoping someone will ask a question you've never heard before about something that you don't know, because it's a moment for you to continue learning and be open to learning something new, something that surprises you. It's kind of refreshing.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm still learning all the time.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
I think that if you're someone that's fixed-minded, it's just a different version of operating system. It's just a difference between fixed and growth mind.
Yeah. And I just gave a talk on that called the success mindset. And I talked about the fixed versus growth mindset.
What's your process for preparing for a lecture on a big topic like that?
First, it starts with just the ideation and the goals. What are my teaching objectives? What do I want the end product to be? So you start with the end, and then I try to let it simmer for a little bit. This course that I'm working on is on the spiritual side of my business, Live Life Spiritual Direction. And so I just let it simmer. And I've actually been thinking about it for months and haven't had time to work on it. And so I got a flip chart on the wall and I just started putting ideas and outlines on it. And then I realized, okay, I've got enough. I can get started. And I've blocked off time. Actually, this is perfect timing for this question. I blocked off time this month to work on it. And I use two parts of it, well, three parts of it. Part is just like, what do I know based on experience? And I start scoping it out. I usually type it out and start writing it out. What does the research say on this topic? And what is my intuition telling me? Our intuition is often discounted. It's funny because I remember the last bank I worked for, I went into my boss's office and I was like, we need to do this, blah, 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 blah. He's like, show me the data. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm like, but I just know.
Right. Well,
but I had to go back and build my case, which I get it. You want both, but, that trust and that intuition, is also there to help move us along with the process.
So when you came back with an updated, maybe formalized proposal for it, did you also include, amongst the data that you had researched and gathered, did you also include any soft data that was your intuition into that presentation, formally speaking?
I think what I probably added along those lines was my observations.
Yeah. That's same. I guess that's exactly what I would expect.
Yeah.
You look for the data that will give you evidence to either support or disprove your theory and intuition. Your observations say, I'm seeing this and I believe this is truth and reality. Let me go find out if that is accurate or not and valid. So you go out, you gather that data, and at the end result is supporting data in one way or another. But it always has to start, I guess, with intuition.
Well, it's our drive, right? Like, why am I even doing this class to begin with? Why is it even an idea? Well, that idea is a spark of intuition. That's the seed that maybe we can't completely explain. And thankfully, for a lot of things I do on the spiritual side of my business, is science is starting to come together and support a lot of the spiritual practices that have been going on for years.
Do you feel that when you see that there is research and scientific evidence that supports the stuff that you have been already involved in, invested in there's an intuition that you have, as well as a practice, does it empower you or is it irrelevant? Because you didn't have the data before. You didn't need that validation. And so you were going off of what you believe to be true and feel right. Mm-hmm. But when there is data to support this and research and evidence to support the notions that you had before, is that necessary? Is that needed and validating, or does it not matter at all?
I don't know that it matters to me personally, but it matters to many of my clients. So for many of my clients to have that, it's very helpful for them, because our belief system really informs our life experience. So, think about it. A placebo works for a reason, right? Because you think it's working. So, adding that is really helpful, not only for my individual clients, if we're working on life coaching type things, or with my corporate clients, if I'm coming in to teach meditation, for example, that's one area where there is a ton of supporting research for the benefits of meditation. So going into for example, a corporate setting, that is really, really helpful.
Yeah, they're already used to exactly what you went through. Show me the data. I want to know the evidence to support this. And so maybe it's context might be important, who you're talking to and what their needs are, what they need, the information to help them understand or better relate to the service that you're trying to offer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like putting it all together.
And I guess what's important to your clients is therefore by way important to you too.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess really, if I think about it, the data helps me too. We could all use some help with our faith in whatever we're pursuing. So mindset is so important to
Yeah.
success.
Well, I'll tell you something that I firmly believe in. If it feels good, then it must be. And if there are positive results, therefore it is a good science. And if it doesn't have any risk of negative adverse results, then there is no harm.
Yes.
You can't always say the same thing about Western medicine. And this is not a knock on Western medicine. Like I'm very much a patient of it and a recipient of treatment. I don't have a problem at all or criticism about it. I do from the standpoint of business economics and profitability, capitalism. From that standpoint, I'm a firm believer in capitalism, but not to get too deep into all this sort of economic philosophy. But
we could go down the rabbit hole on that one.
Well, we certainly could, and that would be an interesting other conversation. But what I'm trying to get at is that while I am a supporter of Western medicine, I'm very much also an advocate and a supporter of Eastern philosophy, Eastern medicine, spirituality, because those rarely ever tend to lead to any adverse reactions, but they ultimately provide a lot of calm and order in one's life. It's such a wonderful, meaningful practice.
Yeah. And actually right before our recording of this podcast, I had a busy day. And so I took 5 minutes before we were about to go on, and I did a short meditation to just bring me to this present moment so I could be here with you, Noah, and be very present.
I appreciate that. I'm happy that you got that chance. You made that time for yourself, and with the conversation that we're having right now in mind. Everyone should take your class, and we're not going to give away all the secrets here, but if there's something that could help me, and therefore maybe the entire audience, a skill that I could work on that would help me kind of feed my soul in a way that is non-judgmental.
Yeah, one of the biggest skills that I'm going to talk about and teach in this course is setting boundaries. So setting boundaries with people, with work, with the outside world. We have, like I said, a lot of distractions. So phone in the other room, maybe for a certain period of time. All the other pages of your browser, tabs on your browser closed, just working on that one thing. So setting boundaries, learning to say no. We unconsciously often say yes without really thinking about what we want. Well, this person needs me, or they say they need me. It's like, okay. But at some point, if you overgive, you deplete yourself so much that you're no good to anyone else. One thing I started doing is to bring in some of that rest, but also, it was not even rest, but just joy, and bringing in more joy and lightness is at 5:00, I have a reminder that says, "Did you dance today?" So if I hadn't been listening to music and got a little dancing in, the music goes on while I'm making dinner and get some of that in. Because that's just a reminder, when we bring our body into it, it's a reminder that we are free, that we can move, that we have this other side of us other than just a work machine.
That's amazing. What do you do when the reminder pops up and you're in a bad mood?
I still put on the music.
Does it help you get out of it?
It can, yeah. And I call it a win, even if I sway a little bit. It's all about having more self-compassion and like, this is the best I can do today. This is the best I can do today.
Yeah, it's a win for
and
me.
Sometimes it does. You can get into it, and it can, it at least lifts you a little bit to help you find just a little bit easier place for yourself.
That's a lovely idea. I'm I'm focused on all the wrong things. I'm focused on how the irony of needing your technology to remind you to take a break from technology. But that's the world we live in. Well, how did you decide to get out of banking?
Yeah, I think just my nature is I need change. When I get to a point where I feel like I've learned the bulk of what I can learn or ready for something else. So I had started riding a motorcycle, and there was not a lot for women in the market. And it was just hard to find anything that fit, that looked right. And so I started putting these ideas together. I figured out how to get what I wanted to do manufactured, and I got myself a show February of '07 and said, okay, let's just try it and see what happens. Well, in about a 2-month period, maybe around that time at the bank, I was in the group that was trying to figure out how to downsize. And I realized, I didn't get the promotion to lead the group that I wanted. And I realized that my ego wanted the job. I didn't want the job. So
that must have been a realization for you, that self-discovery.
yeah, completely. I mean, it was really freeing because I was disappointed that I didn't get it. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, there's a lot of parts of this job that, quite frankly, are a big hassle.
Yeah.
So because I knew what was available, I went to my new boss and I said, I'll stay as long as you need me to help you transition, but I'd really like one of those packages. And I had a lot of runway from that package. Severance packages were much more generous back then. And I had a lot of runway to see what I could do with my business. So I did my business selling women's motorcycle apparel full time for 5 years. And
did you look for a bank loan?
No, I self-financed.
That's awesome. How did it go?
Yeah, great. I'm really proud of what I built. I had great relationships with my customers. I sold into motorcycle and scooter shops. I sold online. I was doing shows. I was riding my motorcycle across the country to do these shows. It was a complete blast. And after about 5 years, I realized I was going to have to put a lot more money in it to take it to the next level. And I also realized that as fun as it was in many ways, it wasn't the kind of business I wanted to stay in. I went from commercial banking, which was very conservative, to the motorcycle industry was the absolute opposite of that. And I really wanted something more in between.
Yeah.
And also, I realized I'm more of a service person, so I was selling product, which can be viewed as a service, but really what I wanted to offer was, my skills. So I started looking into teaching because I missed the training that I was doing, the teaching and training, and I taught entrepreneurship at Columbia College in Chicago, which was so fun because I was teaching art students versus business students. So that was a nice, neat change of pace.
Yeah. What was that like? How would you characterize the differences between those two environments?
Yeah, great question. For the most part, there's a lot more type A's in banking, as you can imagine. So it was a little more laid back. And for the class, the students had to put together their own mini business over the course and practice selling and see what they could do with it. And the creativity of their businesses were really phenomenal.
That's awesome. Their presentations probably look pretty good too.
Yeah. And they were really fun. Really fun.
How long did you teach at Columbia College?
Just 2 semesters because this is just how life works sometimes. I had one of my former colleagues come speak to my students about financing a business. And afterwards he said, we're looking for someone to start this credit training program. Do you know anyone? And I just paused and he said, oh, wait, you should do this. And I was ready for that next challenge, for that next opportunity. So that's when I went back into banking, and I did start a training program for the commercial bank there. And that was another great banking adventure.
That's pretty exciting. What a way to find yourself suddenly back into that world when you weren't expecting it.
Yes, exactly. Was not expecting it whatsoever. And it just came at the perfect time.
Yeah. Leveraging both your banking background as well as like your experience now teaching. You left that role to go do what after?
So I left banking to teach finance at the University of Illinois at the College of Business there, the Gies College of Business. I was getting to the point where I was looking, what is the next thing for me?
You were there, I know, for a little bit, but I want to actually focus now on what you do today, because it's quite a bit different from banking.
Yeah. My business is Live Life LLC, and it has two brand names underneath it. So I first started Live Life Spiritual Direction in 2021. I had been informally, had been a spiritual coach, spiritual practitioner since 2018. That was very informal, but through creating the business, my website, I was able to offer sessions to people, spiritual life coaching sessions to people remotely. And I started getting inbound calls from companies to do meditation workshops and things like that. So I thought, well, a lot of companies don't want the spiritual aspect because that could turn some people off. And the truth is, there's all this research that backs up what I would be teaching anyway. So I created Live Life Business Consulting as well. I not only do one-on-one coaching with professionals, but I have a blast going in and teaching stress management, meditation. I've even gone into companies and done Reiki and meditation. And Reiki is an energy healing that also has a bunch of research and data to back it up. It's done as integrative care in progressive hospitals and can be really effective. So it's really exciting for me to be able to bring these concepts almost subversively, but not really, into a corporation and help people just find more meaning in what they're doing, better balance, and expect more for themselves.
Yeah, sounds wonderful. Sounds like a great service that nobody couldn't use. If you have somebody who approaches you and says, I like what you're doing, I'd love to benefit from the services, that's one thing. They're buying into it and they're like, I want this and I need this for myself. What's it like to go into a group setting? So a company, an individual or a group of people have made a decision that this is something that they're going to do for a whole bunch of other people. Not all of them have just made this decision. What's it like going into that kind of a setting and having a whole bunch of different opinions and people participating in something, whether they agree to it or not?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that has happened. And I was invited to a leadership meeting, and there are some people in the back with their arms crossed and not really engaging that much, but they're still picking up the information. It's still running in the background.
Yeah.
And I think it can still be helpful, even if someone is a little resistant to it. And I always have people who are enthusiastic and are already doing some of this. So, knock on wood, so far, it's gone really well. But sometimes people just need to let it ruminate. And of course, they're going to be people that it's not for them and they're not going to consider it. And that's absolutely okay. But for some people, it's the spark. It's the spark that starts and maybe ignited later.
When you're in a room and you see the people in the back of the room with their arms folded, do you go and try to engage them, or is the move to ignore them?
Oh, that's a great question. It depends on how much time I have. If it's a short amount of time, I'm going to keep the energy up and I'm going to keep it moving. Inspiring, I think, is a better way to push people than otherwise.
It's not your responsibility to convince everyone.
Yeah, if a handful of people walk away with some really good tools and make improvements in their life, That is very meaningful. And I remember I was in a small group setting. Not many people showed up. It was actually for ecstatic dance, if you know what that is.
I do not.
It's free flow dance. Anybody can do whatever they want, no judgment zone. But there was only a handful of us. And this is someone who this is a DJ that has done this for thousands. And, his thought was, whether it's 1 or 1,000, as long as you touch someone and help someone, that's all that matters.
Yeah. Great goal. Great insight and wisdom. Are there things from your background in finance and banking that you have found to be instrumental, the skills that you have leveraged from that to help you in this journey, this part of your career path of helping others in wellness and success?
Yeah, in 2 ways. One, it helps my business. It helps me that I have some business sense and I don't know everything, and I get a lot of help. I do a little bit of spiritual business coaching. So helping other healers that are trying to get their business off the ground. There's a false belief that if you're doing spiritual work, you shouldn't be making money at it. And I think that's an old idea based on a principle that gets misinterpreted from the Bible. Money is the root of all evil. What it actually says is something like money is the root of all kinds of evil, meaning it can be corrupted. Sure. Money is just energy, just like a lot of different things. So there's, helping people correct or heal those false beliefs. There are people that are very in touch with their spiritual side and have a business outside of spirituality, and I can really give them some basic tools or more advanced tools to help them with their business as well.
Can I ask you a sensitive question?
Sure.
You have this mindset. You have this deep belief system. If you always had that, and if it was always part of you, how did you feel while you were working at a bank? I know I can look at it in one way. First of all, I will say one thing as a disclaimer. Specifically to what you were doing, you were helping people. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that will judge a book by its cover unfairly and say, okay, this is a bank. Bank is all about making money. Maybe what I'm really getting at is, how do you reconcile the optics of working at a bank while still having this spiritual, human first approach to your whole entire lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say over time, my spirituality has deepened, right? So it hasn't always been what it is today. So that's part of it. The other part is, I think service has been always very important to me in some way. We talked about, helping businesses grow provides jobs. We did a lot of volunteering in banking. The Community Reinvestment Act requires banks to give back to the community in different ways. And while that is federally driven and rules driven, it does give us the opportunity to do giving back. So, teaching financial literacy to folks who don't know it, kids or underserved areas, working at a soup kitchen, whatever it might be, it still matters, even though it's being driven in a large part, not always by, the requirements of the law.
Yeah. I think that's why I curated or maybe adjusted my question to the optics, addressing it from the optics, because they are businesses. Their bottom line and top line revenue is important, but I think the optics from outside are often unfair.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to mention is, it's not the people, it's the system, right? Yeah. Our systems can be very hard, and they don't always work for people. So we're trying to do the best we can based on where we're at. So we're in a society, especially if you're publicly traded, that you've got to be posting results every quarter.
Yeah.
So you're being pushed from a lot of different sides.
Boy, do I know what that's like. one of the things I started the conversation off, you don't fit in a box because you don't often see this kind of a leap through the different things that you have done. And it's extremely commendable that you truly are living your truth and your own philosophy. Even in the banking world, you were doing it then. You're serving others and you're helping and you're advocating, seeing what we can do. How creative can we get?
Yeah, and I think the overarching thread that brings it all together that I think is so important for all of us, that it's so easy to lose sight of, is being in touch with our own authenticity and who we are, because who we are matters, and we live in a world that wants us to be something else. I saw a quote recently that was like, to be yourself in a world that is trying to push you to be something else is an act of defiance. We can get a lot of judgments from other people if we don't fit into a box. I've said before, like, I'm not here to meet your expectations. I'm here to live my life, you know?
Totally.
So when we come from a place of authenticity and we break through that barrier of worrying so much about what other people think, that's where the success, the joy, more love is on the other side of that, when you break through it and get to be who you are. And my tagline for my spiritual direction business is live the song of your soul. And that is my guiding force around my mission and vision.
Denise, this has been fantastic. This has been spiritual, insightful, and enjoyable. So thank you for sharing your background, your skills, your experience, and your story with us here.
My pleasure, Noah.
I want to thank Dr. Robert Rubin for recommending Denise as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.